This just kind of went a little bananas on Twitter yesterday. Our friend Greg Tepper of Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine had called my attention to it initially, that after Texas 7-on-7 had said, hey, we're not able to do this, 7-on-7 this year. It makes sense not to do it this year. Apparently another group that's come in called Championship 7-on-7 and said, hey, we're going. It's dropping today is what they're saying. And a couple of reporters that said, hey, some exciting news or whatever. And the people at Texas 7-on-7, the Texas High School Coaches Association, and even the UIL all disavowed it and said, this is not us. We don't know what this group is. And apparently it's this whatever described as a rogue group that's trying to set up their own deal, making a deal to do it in College Station, which then also did not please the Texas 7-on-7 folks.
Yeah, and my colleague at Horns 24/7, Nick Harris, inadvertently kind of got himself caught in it because Nick's thinking like a lot of us, Craig, we just want football in some way, shape, or form. So if an organization's coming out saying, hey, we're having a 7-on-7 tournament this summer, we're thinking, okay, cool, football. But like you said, the THSCA and the Texas 7-on-7 organization, which I think people need to distinguish, like they're not tied. They're all different entities in terms of the UIL is its own entity, as is the THSCA, as is the Texas 7-on-7 organization, which is made up. Your board of directors on that are going to be high school head coaches or former head coaches.
Yes, so, they are.
There is some tie in there, but I saw Chad Worrell, who's on the board, come out and say point blank, if Veterans Memorial Park and College Station host this thing, Texas State 7-on-7 tournament will not be back in College Station in 2021.
Yeah, he's the head coach at Brock.
Yes.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that also because another quote that I saw, and it was pretty interesting. And I want to make sure I find the actual quote. I see the one that you're talking about not returning to College Station there. I see that one. And then there was another quote that I thought was really interesting about it, where one of the coaches said, here it is, the assistant director, the head coach of Buffalo, Brandon Houston.
Yes, who's been on that board for a long time.
He's the second in command with that thing. His quote to the folks in College Station, don't step over our dollar for someone else's dime. So, yeah. They weren't happy about that. That was his tweet. Don't step over our dollar for someone else's dime. So they weren't pleased about that as well. So that all kind of got a little bit lit yesterday.
Yeah, it's always interesting whenever a third party comes in and tries to do something. And I don't, Craig, it's not my. You can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I've never got the impression that the THSCA or any of those governing bodies are just totally against third parties. It's when the third party takes it upon themselves to take the route of let's ask for forgiveness rather than permission.
Yeah, that's when they go rogue.
Yeah, let's not include anybody in our decision and just do it. And especially at a time like this, if you're just going to completely go rogue and try to do something, and I would think high school coaches, the number one thing you're probably concerned about more than anything else is safety. If your student athletes are out there participating in an unsanctioned event where you don't know the organizers, you don't know the format, you don't know the team setup, you know nothing, it's one thing. And I think now, I think the third parties, especially the folks that run the select 7-on-7 stuff and the traveling 7-on-7, I think there's a better relationship with those guys and the high school coaches now than there was probably 5 years ago. Not saying it's perfect or whatever will be, but I think it's better.
Well, your boss Bobby Burton will tell you that.
Yeah,
I mean, it's closely tied in with 7-on-7. That this was a relationship that took a while to build and get the proper sanctioning. They followed all the procedures and protocols. They've got a lot of sweat equity in this.
Yeah, and I like sweat equity. I like that term. Yeah. And we'll get Mike Roach back on next week, and Mike can talk about this. And even from the standpoint of you're starting to see high school coaches, especially in your major metro areas, start to trust private trainers, but those relationships, again, have taken years to cultivate. Sure. I think now, again, Craig, I just think it boils down to safety. You don't know who these people are, what their motives are, what they're doing, how the teams are going to be picked. And if you've got a student athlete who ends up, catching the virus from an unsanctioned event that you had no control over, I can see how that's going to create a lot of problems.
And for the layman out there who says, well, what is the motivation? For several, depending on who's involved with this, some people are motivated by money, by trying to make a buck off of this, make some money off of this. And then I noticed in some of the Twitter exchanges yesterday, someone clearly who was not informed tried to take a shot at those who organize Texas 7 on 7 about being money. And again, Brandon Houston said, I've never received one dime for this. That's not what we're about with this. This is about, developing kids. It's about the kids and about that. They're not, it has nothing to do with the money thing. So that's also a very sensitive part of all of this and why this thing came out. And I just saw a really impassioned, I don't know if plea is the right word, but you might say conversation or an address. That's the word I'm looking for. An impassioned address from Joe Martin, the executive director of the Texas High School Coaches Association, a couple of days ago, talking. It was in response to the UIL's announcement about the slow play, the rollout in being able to get back into weight rooms and work. And we visited with John Walsh, the new head coach at San Marcos, yesterday. We visited with Todd Dodge, the head coach at Westlake, the day before, about the very methodical, carefully crafted process they have to go through in starting to get their kids into condition. And Joe Martin's address was along those same lines. He said, let's be careful out there. Let's not sacrifice the fall by rushing our kids into conditioning and weightlifting, things that their bodies aren't ready for full blast right now because they've been sitting dormant for the past almost 3 months. Let's be careful with how we're doing this. And it's like, let's remember the bigger issue, the bigger prize is August and getting our teams ready to play football at the end of August. Let's move toward that. Let's move carefully. Let's plan for that. Let's do it the right way. This is something that flies in the face of that, and it has a lot of coaches upset going, none of our kids are ready to be rushed into any of this right now. Who are these people that are rushing our kids who haven't had any conditioning at all to bring them into this and do this? And that's what a big part of this firestorm is about.
I'm laughing because I'm looking at Coach Houston's post on Twitter where he says, FYI for Texas high school coaches, this is not the annual regular Texas State 7-on-7 event, not sanctioned, blah, blah, blah. And then Cameron Cox, who's an assistant at Refugio, steps in and says, that's a no from me, Chief. Like someone else said, we're waiting on stipulations for a June 8th start date and coming up with plans to safety implement a routine within those guidelines. Don't need these guys messing stuff up for us. And I would imagine, you can tell by the social media reaction, he's definitely not alone in his opinion.
Yeah, and that seems to be by and large the opinion of the coaches involved with it and the Coaches Association. So that was what the firestorm of that stuff that I had up front before getting into your notes.
Can I just say this? Yeah. Like, I enjoyed the State 7-on-7 tournament because you can get a lot of work done during the summer, during the dead time. There is no place hotter than maybe the seventh circle of hell than College Station in late June and early July. Like it's like the sun just beams directly hotter on College Station in those summer months. Like, I swear, as soon as I get back into the greater Austin area, I feel a nice breeze or something, or it's cooler. It is unbearably hot.
There are those in the Golden Triangle that might argue with you about that if you're down there in the piney woods of East Texas, or if you're in the greater Houston area, not being close enough to the ocean breeze, the Gulf breezes. But it's warm there.
Oh, man, it's brutal.